Hello and welcome to another episode of The Side Hustle where we pull professionals aside to talk about their hustle. It's your host, Kristen, and today's episode is extra special because we have a guest host with us, the one and only Julia from First DIBS, another segment of our podcast, The Clean Getaway. Julia, it's great to have you today, and I look forward to what you have in store for us. I'm especially excited for this episode because our guest is a friend of mine that I met here at DePaul who has been making waves on the internet. He's a comedian, content creator, podcaster, and an internet personality who has taken the Twitter world by storm. You might know him as Harry or Lil Sasquatch from Barstool Sports, a pop culture and sports media company, and we are thrilled to have him on the show today. So get ready for some laughs as we dive into the world of Lil Sasquatch and his content creation success story. And let's give a warm welcome to our host, Julia.
My name is Julia, and I will be your host for today's episode on digital creation. In the next few minutes, we will dive into the world of content creation, covering everything from what it's like to go viral online to advice for aspiring creators. Stay tuned to hear from Lil Sasquatch, a former DePaul student turned professional content creator. Today we have with us Harry Settel, also known as Lil Sasquatch. Harry is best known for his comedic tweets and videos, which have gained traction on social media and resulted in quite a substantial online following. Today, Harry hosts his own podcast, writes for pop culture blog Barstool Sports, and tours around the country doing stand-up comedy. With just under 1 million followers combined on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter, Lil Sasquatch is an experienced content creator here to tell us what it's like to work in the world of digital creation. Harry, thank you for being here today. How are you doing? How is your day going?
My day is going good. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, according to a Stanford University study from 2016, the chances of going viral are about 1 in 1 million. What do you think of those chances? Do you consider yourself lucky, or do you think there's more of a formula for getting a reaction online?
Tough question. You guys are throwing the heavy hitters right off the bat. I will say, I think it used to be like that. I think it used to be really hard to go viral, but it seems like now with all the different algorithms and like TikTok and Instagram, it seems like anything can just explode at any time. I've read stuff that TikTok hand picks videos that they want to go viral and then they just blow them up. So I will say, I think it's definitely hard, but I don't think it's as uncommon as it used to be.
Sure. So going back to your story and how you began, can you tell us what it was like to sort of get to where you are today?
I started doing Twitter when I was in 9th grade. So I started just doing like 1 tweet a day. I would try and do a joke and they all sucked, but I would just keep doing that. And then at the end of that year, I think I had 1,000 followers. And then I just kept doing it pretty much all throughout. I still tweet a lot, but I did that so the first year was 1,000 followers. Then the second year, I started to gain more traction. And then I got 10,000 followers by the end of that year. And then I think at the end of the next year, it was 100,000. So that was a pretty steady growth. And I think the whole thing was pretty much, I was just very consistent with it at a young age. So it ended up working out.
So you were how old when this all started?
Probably 13.
Oh, wow. So you've been doing this for a while.
Yeah, I have.
So what was it like to go viral with those first initial posts that gained a lot of attention online? Did anything change? What happened on your end?
Nothing really changed in my life. It was pretty much I remember I had one post go viral. And at the time on Twitter, going viral was getting 10,000 likes on a tweet. And now it's 500,000. And because Twitter's grown so much since then. And that one didn't really do much. Nothing really happened. But after the second time, I had a tweet that got 100,000 likes, and that I did some dumb meme thing, and it was on BuzzFeed and stuff. So that was kind of cool at the time. And I probably gained a lot of followers from that stuff, but nothing really changed in my life until started actually working at Barstool and making money. Because before then, it was really just a hobby. I would just go online and write dumb jokes.
So at what point did it go from a hobby to more of a serious sort of thing?
It was probably when I was so I went to DePaul, and when I went to school, it was still a hobby. And I think it was when we got sent home from COVID in 2020. And I went home and I started working on stuff like that, working on videos a lot. And then that's when I got reached out to from Barstool. And that's when it became a job, which is actually a really weird transition because it's weird doing something as a hobby for so long. I've been doing it for 5 or 6 years at the time. And then all of a sudden it's you're getting paid to do it. And it kind of freaks you out a little bit, but I got used to it over time.
Yeah. You kind of mentioned that you naturally sort of started posting funny things online and then it kind of started getting more attention. But what inspired you to pursue comedy and memes as a way to create content? Is that just what you're naturally drawn to? What pushed you in that direction?
Yeah, I've always been like a big comedy fan my whole life, sketch comedy and like stand-up comedy. And I want to say it was actually like Vine. I was never on Vine, the app. That was the people on there, like Cody Ko and like Nick Coletti, all those dudes. They were like the driving force for me, like, oh, these guys are really funny. And I was like, oh, I think I could try that. So I started doing stuff like that, but that was like after Vine ended. It was like I think I started tweeting like the year that Vine ended. So that was probably the pretty big driving force into like doing comedy stuff.
So some sources of inspiration there. When people ask you what you do, how do you describe that? What do you tell them?
It's a funny question. I don't know. I say I'm a comedian to most people because that's like what I do is stand-up comedy for the most part. And then I work at Barstool too. But yeah, usually I don't really tell people that often. Like I usually, if someone asks me like an Uber driver or something, I just say like I work in New York. I don't really like saying like, oh, I'm a content creator because I think it sounds weird to say that. Or I'll say I work at Barstool Sports.
Why are you hesitant to say that you are a content creator? Like, why does that feel weird?
Because I think if you look at like the masses of like who is a content creator, there's a lot of like pretty bad stuff in there, like not very entertaining. I don't know. I don't want to like make fun of those people, but they suck, a lot of them. And I don't want to be grouped into like that. Oh, I create content because it kind of, it sounds like a fake job in a way.
Well, you've definitely found a way to, monetize it and make a career out of it. Yeah, that kind of brings me to my next topic, which is the difference between influencers and content creators. So according to Sprout Social, digital creators or content creators create content. Put very simply, the job is in their title. They create videos, photos, graphics, blogs, etc., and distribute it across various channels. Influencers, on the other hand, are social media personalities who influence their followers to do or buy something. They share their lives, promote products and services they use along the way. So I think you're a pretty interesting case because you are 100% a content creator, but you still have that massive online following that sort of makes you into a social media personality. So where do you feel like you fit more? Do you think you're both of those things?
Yeah. So I think the way that they described is pretty accurate. I think like when I think of like influencers, I think of like people on like TikTok that do like reviews of stuff and like and I don't know, they do a lot of ads and stuff like that rather than like, it's more like you're following because you're like, oh, this person's entertaining rather than being like, oh, this person is creating. Like they're not like sitting down and like writing things. They're more just like putting the camera on and being like vlogging, stuff like that. Like that's something that I think of as like an influencer. And then like a content creator, I guess, is someone who like, I don't know, I think of it more of like a pre-planned type stuff rather than just like thrown on a camera.
So you would say you fit more into like the content creator side of things?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's interesting because you can end up as both.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think you can. I think there's definitely some people who like are big in like their personality is like everyone loves their personality, and then like they also make really funny stuff. So it's I think it can go both ways. I don't think I really go both ways though. I don't really like post anything like about my life really. It's more just like stuff that I wrote down that I thought was funny.
Well, you are an internet personality and you do have a fan base. So I'm wondering, have brands ever reached out to you about doing like sponsorship deals or sponsored posts or things like that? And how do you react to that?
Yeah, so yes and no. Twitter is funny because Twitter is probably like the least monetizable app out of all the apps. Like there's no way to directly make money from Twitter unless you do advertisements, which I've never done an advertisement on Twitter. And like the ones that people reach out to you for are like these like scam brands that like you don't really, it's not a very prideful thing to be like promoting. It's all like weird. I don't know. But yeah, exactly. Stuff like that. And so Twitter, I've never really been reached out to by any like big brands. I actually like, even thinking about it, there's like one person I can think of who's ever done like massive deals through like a Twitter account. It's very like uncommon for people to do that. But I do work with advertisers, obviously, because we at Barstool, like our podcasts, they're all sponsored by brands. So it's like Barstool has like a whole sales team and stuff. So I don't like really technically work with them because I read their ads that they send us. But like I don't really ever like talk to the advertiser.
Sure. So you feel like Twitter is not the most ideal channel for advertising things?
Yeah, it's got to be the worst one by far.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say are some of the biggest misconceptions about your job or your title and what you do?
I mean, my job working at Barstool, I think there's a big misconception that people are like, oh, you guys must just be getting hammered all day. They think that everyone here is just drinking 24 hours a day, but it's not really like that. It's like there's people here working all the time, and really you're never drinking here ever. So I guess that's a misconception from my job personally. I don't really think that really covers the whole content creator thing. I mean, a misconception for like content creators.
Yeah, or about you. What's something that just people don't really get quite right?
I mean, I don't want to say it's like hard. It's not.
So you're saying it's easy?
I mean, I don't think it's like, it's hard to put like a label on it. Like some things I do are definitely easier than other things that I do. I think there's like a lot of work goes into like behind the scenes stuff. It's definitely like an ideal job in terms of hours. It's not like I'm like working 24 hours a day. It's more like working by my own schedule. The only thing I really have scheduled in is the 2 shows that I do every week. And then everything else is like on my own time. So, I mean, it's pretty lenient in terms of stuff like that. I wouldn't say it's easy, but I definitely wouldn't say it's hard. Also, it's like I like doing it, so it makes it easy.
Do you end up having to travel a lot for work, or what is that like? People don't really know anything about what it's like to be a professional content creator.
Yeah, so I travel like every week, but not for, so I'll travel for work at Barstool. Like we'll do some videos or something that we have to like go somewhere and film stuff, but that's like once every 4 months. Me and my the co-host of my podcast, Rome, we do a show called Neighborhood Eats, where we go to like different cities and we try like the best food that they're known for. So like we went to LA and we did street tacos, and we did like the best food truck tacos in LA. So like we traveled for that. I don't really travel a lot for Barstool, but for stand-up I travel almost every week.
Were you making video content out of that food tour experience, or what kind of content did you produce from that?
Yeah, that was like a mini series. It's like seasonal. So I think we're going to start doing that again soon. But that is pretty much, we go and we film the whole thing, and then we'll be there for like 3 days maybe. And that'll be like one like 15-minute video, 10-minute video. And then we'll do like 5 of those over the course of 4 months probably. So those will all come out and they get like sold to an advertiser. And then like we take however 8 months off and then we do it again.
So what is a typical day in your life like?
Pretty standard. I mean, I go to bed really late. I wake up at like 10:30, 11, and then I go and I do this live show on YouTube called The Yak at Barstool, and that's every day. That's Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. until like 2:30, 3. And then on like Tuesdays, I record our podcast as well. So usually I'll do the Yak and then I'll do the podcast. And then that's pretty much it for the day. And then I do stand up at night. I go to like comedy clubs in New York. So that's pretty much it like every day. Unless I'm going on the road, then I travel and then I just lay in my bed until I have to go do a show.
The Yak, is that a podcast? Is that video episode? What is that exactly?
So the Yak is it's like a 7-person show and it's every day. And it used to be on Sirius XM, but Barstool ended their contract with Sirius XM. So now it's a YouTube live show. It's a live streamed show, but it goes out on like Apple Podcasts and Spotify too. But it's pretty much like, it's supposed to be a YouTube live show. That's where the majority of our listeners are. And that's just like a daily show with 7 people. And there's really like no subject to it. It's just like 7 people just talking. So it's fun though. I like it.
So you've mentioned quite a variety of different kinds of content that you dabble in, from like podcasts, blog posts, videos, etc. What is your favorite form of content to create and why? What do you enjoy doing the most?
Probably like sketches. We're working on a sketch show right now. And that's like that's my favorite thing to do. Podcasting is fun. And it's also like, it's an easy way to get brands attached to it and like make money. So that's like a pretty, I don't know. It's like podcasting is so saturated right now that it's pretty hard to have like a really successful podcast because every single person in the world has a podcast. But sketches I like doing because it's kind of like you have an idea, you write it out completely, you write in all the jokes. And then if it's funny, it's funny. It's like podcasting. It's like you could have like 30 minutes where there's no jokes in it the entire time. So I like putting out something that like I'm like, okay, this is funny, rather than like podcast where it's like maybe it will be funny, maybe it won't, because it's not as pre-planned. So I like having more control over it.
Sure. Have you gotten any opportunities from the content you've created? Has that opened any doors for you?
Yeah, I mean, so I like started doing stand-up comedy like 2 years ago, and I kind of like worked my way into that world a lot easier than a lot of people do because I had a following already and I worked at Barstool and I had like fans. So it's a lot easier to like work myself in and like getting booked at clubs and stuff like that, when some people have to do stand-up for 10 years before they get booked at a club. So I think that's probably the biggest door that's open for me, is like it's made it a very easy transition, like already having a following following.
Yeah. Gives you sort of sense of credibility. You have a reputation already. Sure.
Yeah.
So with your podcast, we know you do stand-up comedy, but what else has creating content allowed you to do that maybe you never pictured yourself doing before?
I guess I've met some cool people. Yesterday, Michael B. Jordan was in our office, which was cool. So got to see him. I guess that's an opportunity.
Yeah. So, your past of creating content has gotten you to this point where, you're able to have these kinds of crazy experiences. If you could create content for any brand, what would you choose? Like, who would you be excited to work with?
Geez, I don't know. I don't really have anything for that. I will say we did do ads for this company, Bare Bottom. It's like a clothing brand, and they sent us a bunch of free clothes, and it's like the nicest clothes I've ever had. So that's pretty cool. But aside from that, I mean, some of the food ones are good, like the Factor and what is the food delivery things?
Oh, like HelloFresh?
Yeah, HelloFresh. They send you a bunch of free food. So that's cool.
Yeah. So what would be your dream thing to produce?
Probably a show.
Cool.
Like a sitcom.
Okay, so would you want to write for that sitcom?
Yeah, that's what when I was in school, I was going to school to be a screenwriter. I mean, I would definitely want to write a show. I think that would be awesome. But also those jobs are they don't pay well. It's pretty crazy.
So speaking of jobs paying well, would you consider your role to be something that does pay well? Because from an outsider's perspective, people have no idea what level influencer or content creator is on.
Yeah, so I mean, we do all these ads and stuff for our podcast, but also I have a salary-based job. So I don't get a direct income from the ads. That's paying for my salary when we get ads. But then, I mean, I would say, I think it's a pretty wide gap. I'd say a majority of people probably don't make a lot of money at all. They probably make good money, spending money. But the people who are really big and are doing ads, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars. The huge TikTok people, when they can ad for, I don't know, body armor or something like that, they're probably getting paid $100,000 for one ad. I know people who they make their living off of Instagram ads. So there's definitely those people who can get super good ad deals. And then there's other people, if I was not at Barstool and I was doing ads, I don't think I'd be making a livable wage. You got to be pretty huge to make that level of money on an advertisement, and it's hard to do, I think.
Yeah. By huge, what does huge mean to you? What certain number of followers do you think would provide a cushiony?
Probably 1 million.
Okay.
People who have 1 million followers on one platform. If they're doing ads, they're probably getting paid a lot of money for those ads.
Sure. So you think the majority of the money is in sponsored posts, Instagram ad, things like that?
Yeah, definitely.
Sure. So how is it different working for a company like Barstool versus being your own independent person in terms of brand partnership, sponsored deals, things like that?
Yeah, so I kind of loosely brought it up earlier, but Barstool has we have 2 floors in our office. First floor, which is all of the content people, and then some people who do editing. And then the second floor is 90% sales. So we have a massive sales team. So it's I don't have to reach out to any brands or anything. They sell the ads themselves and they bring them to me and they're hey, do this ad. So it's it makes that part super easy. It's it's pretty much, it's not even a thought in my head. People who are independent, I'm pretty sure they have to handle that all themselves. They have to reach out. Brands will reach out to them, or they reach out to brands, and then they're hey, can you do an ad for us? And also, I would assume that since they're not a salesperson, they're probably not getting the greatest deals in the world. So they're probably hey, we'll pay you this amount of money to do this ad, and they're okay, I'll do it. Rather than we have people who negotiate and stuff. So the sales thing, all of that is not even a part of my life because there's 30 people here who are controlling that for me. Rather than if I was independent, I have to do it all myself.
Sure. So another thing about being independent versus working with a company, how much creative control do you have over the content that you make? Are they giving you a creative brief? Is it your ideas? What's going on?
Yeah, we have full creative control over everything. Obviously, there's some stuff that you might not want to do, but it just looks good to do it in terms of helping the company out. So there's stuff like that. But if I'm doing something myself, if I'm doing my podcast or if we're doing sketches, it's fully in my control to make that however I want. Obviously, if I went and did something insane, said something horrible, then they probably wouldn't be happy about that. But I think that's also I would never do that because the masses wouldn't be happy with that either. So yeah, it's full creative control.
So how do you come up with the ideas for your content?
I write a lot. I try and write every day. And then I guess it's sometimes you can just think of something. Some of the best things I've ever done, some of the funniest things I've ever made have just been me sitting in my room and be oh, I'm going to do this. And then it turns out super funny. So it's you can either write it out or you can just wait for an idea to hit you. But writing is probably the number one thing that I do.
Cool. What would you say is the best and the worst part about being a creator?
there's definitely like a certain, there's definitely a lot of negatives. There's obviously a lot of positives. Like all the positives are like, okay, I do what I want to do for work and I make a livable wage. And then I also enjoy what I'm doing. I'm doing what I want to do. So that's obviously, those are big positives. But there's also like, there's negatives of being like, especially with like how the internet is now with like TikTok, there's 7 million people out there who are like making videos and like trying to be funny online. So it's like a lot more like competition. And it's also like you go through like phases where you're like, maybe I'm not funny and maybe everyone hates me. So there's definitely like that aspect to it too. It's like there's a lot of pressure. If you're like, if you post something that people think isn't funny, they all reply and say, hey, you're not funny. And then you're like, oh man, maybe I'm not funny. So there's definitely like that part to it, which sucks. I'd say some of the getting bigger and like more spotlight on you is not something that I really enjoy. I just like to do, like I like to make stuff and like have it do well and have people be like, this was really funny. I enjoyed this. I'm not someone who's like craving the growth. In terms of like stand up, it's like I perform at clubs that sit like 250 people. And then there's Chris Rock who's doing like arenas. And it's like, I don't know if I would ever even want to get to that point. Not that I'm saying I ever could get to that point, obviously, but like even the idea of doing that sounds like horrifying to have like 20,000 people watching you. Yeah. So there's definitely like that part. You go in phases of it. Like sometimes like, oh, this is cool. And then sometimes you're like, this sucks.
Yeah. So when your audience is giving you feedback that maybe they didn't necessarily like a post, how do you react to that?
Not great. It's definitely something that I hate happening. But I mean, I've gotten more used to it over time. It's like usually like you post something and you're like, oh, this did really well. And then you're like, oh, I'm going to post this. And then it does horribly. And then, I mean, it kind of puts you in like a mental blender for like a good couple hours, but you just got to move on.
So do you think you've kind of understand what your audience wants to see now after producing content for so long?
Yeah, I mean, I've never really had like a thing. Like I've never really had like a consistent like thing like, oh, this is what I do. This is what everyone wants to see from me. None of my videos have ever had like a reoccurring theme. And like our podcast definitely doesn't have a reoccurring theme. So it's kind of just, I just try and be funny. And it seems like they enjoy that if it works out.
Yeah, they like your brand, your authenticity, and they follow you. And that's why you are where you are now. Has there been anything that surprised you about the work you do now?
Not really. I mean, I will say the only thing that surprised me was that I was able to make a career out of it because like I did it as a hobby for so long and never really thought anything would come of it. I enjoy doing this. So I guess that's the only thing, like that there is opportunities to like make it a job. That's pretty cool. That was the only thing that really surprised me though, in terms of what I do.
Sure. We're going to segue into our last segment here. So the world is constantly changing. Technology is ramping up. We have things like AI coming out now. In your opinion, what is the future of content creation and how do you see the industry evolving in the next few years?
The future of it, I would say, it's hard to predict. I mean, the biggest thing that's like changed everything for me was like TikTok. I don't use TikTok at all, but that definitely changed social media completely. I mean, I think it's probably the most used social media platform in the world. And it definitely made it so that it was like when I first started on Twitter, there was like 5 accounts that were like, okay, these are the funny people on Twitter. And now it's like on TikTok, there's like, oh, here's 700 people wwho all have 40 million followers and they're all doing their own thing. So I think it's definitely saturated the overall like internet more with like people who are like, oh, I want to create stuff. I want to post stuff online. Like it's definitely made that where before you would never really see people like posting videos, hanging out with their friends and stuff on like Instagram. It was all very like, it used to be like stigmatized to post more than like once a day on Instagram. And now it's like people are pumping out 15 videos a day. So I think in terms of like saturation, it's growing a lot. I don't know how long that's going to last. I don't know if that's going to be like I can't really see it growing more, but also I don't think anyone predicted like the whole TikTok thing to happen. So I think it's probably going to just get bigger and bigger.
So you didn't necessarily feel the pressure to get on TikTok and start producing content there, even though you saw it sort of taking off? I
did. So I was on TikTok for a while during that whole like beginning when it was like everyone was exploding. I got on that. And then I just don't like TikTok because it sucks me in. And then I'm like stuck on TikTok for like 5 hours. And I'm usually like not even enjoying it. I'm like angry the entire time. I'm like, I hate all of this, but I can't stop swiping. So I just deleted it and I was like, I'm done with that. But it's definitely like a good platform to use.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that feeling.
Yeah.
So I know you've touched on this a little bit throughout our talk, but do you think that the market for content creation and influencers is too saturated or rather just getting started? What's your take on that?
I don't think it's definitely more saturated than it's ever been, but I don't think that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. thing. I mean, it's like, I think it's like if people want to post stuff, it's like no one's stopping them. So it's like, go for it. But I mean, it's like super saturated. I don't know if it's going to continue to go that way or not, but I will say in terms of like people who are creating content, it seems like no one's having a hard time like finding their own fan base. So I don't think it's really like I don't think it's like a negative thing.
Yeah. So you think there's still opportunities out there for people to make a professional career out of this?
Yeah, I would say probably now more than ever. Yeah, it seems like a lot of people, brands and stuff, are obviously leaning towards people with massive followings. It's probably cheaper to advertise with them. And there's so many options. There's so many people now that are like huge.
All right, Harry, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. We would love it if you could leave our listeners with one last word of wisdom. What advice would you give for anyone looking to make a career out of content creation?
I would say probably the only thing that I would have as advice is just like being consistent. It's like the only way to really like posting something like once or twice is like you're not going to get anything out of that. So it's like really like the only thing that worked for me was just being consistent with it for like 5 years. That's like the number one thing.
All right. Thank you so much, Harry.
Thank you for having me.
We appreciate it.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of The Side Hustle, featuring our guest of honor, Lil Sasquatch, and our wonderful guest host, Julia from First DIBS. We hope you enjoyed listening in on Lil Sasquatch's journey to success as a comedian, content creator, and podcaster, and learned some valuable tips on content creation. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to follow The Clean Getaway, Lil Sasquatch, and Barstool Sports for more content. And again, a big thank you to our guest host, Julia, for bringing her expertise to the show today. And as always, keep hustling.